You made an important point, which is you don't want to try to hit a home run and strike out and end up getting nothing done. And I've heard Ash Carter, former Secretary of Defense, make a similar point that the way you conduct diplomacy with North Korea is to have sort of small, specific, concrete steps, right? So I say that as a caveat to the following question, which is nitpicking at all these details, because a moratorium on missile and nuclear tests doesn't mean that North Korea would have to stop building more nuclear weapons, right? Which makes experts concerned that this could be a way to buy some time while they increase their arsenal. Is that a deal breaker, or should we be cool with the progress that this deal would constitute, even if it meant them, increasing the aggregate number of nuclear weapons they have?
Well, Tommy, I mean, in isolation, a moratorium is a very good thing. You do definitely want North Korea to stop testing. As you are pointing out, the testing is the 1/5 of the iceberg that's above the water, and the rest of the program continues unabated unless there is inspection by the IAEA, et cetera, and pretty stiff provisions. And those are provisions that in the past have tanked efforts to reach and sustain a deal. So a moratorium, while talks are underway, is a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition for making real progress and making real headway. Look, North Korea, in my view, doesn't want to wage a nuclear war. It wants to, in the first instance, if it can swing it, negotiate a rental deal where we basically pay off North Korea month to month, week to week, to tamp down its misbehavior and not to scare the horses.
With their nukes on layaway?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And potentially the North Koreans can, I'm sure, envisage being able to make compromises in the guise of mutual arms reduction and sort of responsible management of nuclear arsenals and all that. And you can always construct a scenario in which there's an even worse option, the unfettered expansion of North Korea's nuclear arsenal, and say, hey, isn't this good? Isn't this worth it? But the question is always going to be, what are we paying for it? And what are we really getting for what we're paying? So the principle that guided us in the Obama administration was we won't pay for something reversible and hypothetical like a promise of a moratorium with something that is irreversible and substantive. But if North Korea will do something, will take an irreversible step to walk back its nuclear and missile programs, to begin coming into compliance with the Security Council resolutions in a way that can't be just switched back at a moment's notice, then for sure we want to respond positively.
Right.
It's the difference, Tommy, between trying to bribe North Korea and what I call a doggy treat, right? I mean, if North Korea takes a step in the right direction, we should respond positively. But we should not be paying North Korea or bribing North Korea to forego the next provocation. That's just a losing proposition.
These analogies are working on me because I have a 5-month-old puppy, and I get it. Lots of treats. Please don't poop in the house. It all makes sense here.
Exactly.
Mark Landler from the New York Times broke this story, so a lot of credit to him. And in that piece, he talked about the fact that the U.S. and South Korea do these big annual joint military exercises that piss off the North Koreans and the Chinese really to no end. They hate it, and in fairness, it kind of looks like we're preparing an invasion, so I get that. We delayed those joint military exercises with the rocks with the South Koreans during the Olympics this year. I was surprised to read in Landler's story in the New York Times that apparently Kim Jong-un didn't demand that the exercises planned for April be suspended again. That is another seemingly remarkably flexible position, no?
Well, again, remember that we're hearing this secondhand so far.
Like fifth hand.
And, I've certainly learned, as you have, that particularly when you're dealing with an authoritarian or a Leninist system, the slogan, world peace, win-win, all that stuff, has to be unpacked pretty significantly before you know what you're really dealing with. So are the South Koreans kind of putting an optimistic gloss on traditional statements by North Korea that, hey, if only America would give up its hostile policy, then, anything is possible. Who knows? Mm-hmm. Maybe that translates into South Korean as, okay, we're ready to give up our nuclear weapons. But to my ear, it means, first, the U.S. needs to withdraw all of its troops from the Korean Peninsula, and then, the President of the United States needs to crawl over a field of broken glass apologizing, and then maybe. So that's why I keep saying that we're in very, very early innings here, and it's way too early to know. But it's wrong to assert that the U.S. ROC annual exercises, and there's sort of two packages of annual exercises each year. It's wrong to assert that those are necessarily deal breakers, because the record shows that when North Korea, which after all is kind of a one-man band, when the leader of North Korea found it convenient to ignore the exercises, he ignored them. And by the way, North Korea conducts the same sort of exercises more or less concurrently, what about that? And then conversely, when the leader of North Korea found it convenient to make this a big casus belli deal breaker, woe is me, the world is unfair, then he turned his propaganda machine on that as evidence of the hostile policy. So North Korea can go either way depending on what it judges to be in its interest in the short term.
Right.
Secondly, if the U.S. and South Korea accept the premise that defensive exercises that are meant to protect Seoul from a sneak attack or a sudden attack from the thousands and thousands of rockets and artillery pieces that are lined up just a few miles north of the DMZ, that those normal defensive exercises, which, by the way, as I said, are partner to the ones that North Korea itself conduct, if we accepted that is on a par with North Korea's illegal nuclear and ballistic missile programs, then what kind of negotiators are we? Those are fundamentally different things. One is straight up legitimate defense. We've been doing it for decades, and guess what? We have never chosen to invade or attack North Korea. The other is explicitly outlawed under a mandatory Chapter 7 of the UN Charter resolution of the Security Council. Those are pretty fundamentally different propositions, and we shouldn't buy into it. The last thing I'd mention is that these exercises are a critical piece in training the conscript army of South Korea. These soldiers turn over every 18 months. It is not a professional volunteer army like the American is. And so to skip 1 year of this training exercise, which, although it has a field component, is really more sort of tabletop computer classroom and logistical training stuff, means that you have a whole generation of South Korean conscripted soldiers who don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Fair point.
And the U.S. and the ROC military are going to have a tough time conducting the defense of Seoul and South Korea if the South Korean conscripts don't get their training in. So dispensing with the exercise entirely is no small matter, above and beyond the principle that you're trading an apple for a poison orange.
Yeah, fair point. We don't want these guys getting up to speed as rockets are literally being fired. And we will all wait with bated breath to see if the Sean Spicer or Sarah Huckabee Sanders of North Korea clarifies these this South Korea readout of the meeting. But a slightly different question for you. Okay, so let's say this is all true and we are going to get to talks. Who the hell is going to lead them?